Chapter 10. Brilliance. On Friday, Mr. Minert called the chorus to order as usual. He took attendance as usual. Then he said, "Hart, it's all yours." Right away, Tim Miller chirped, "Yippee! Free period!" Before a lot more cheering could break out, Hart stood up and said, "Hold it, everybody. Listen a minute. Listen." It got completely quiet. The sudden silence surprised Hart almost as much as it surprised Mr. Minert. Hart froze for a second or two, and his face started to get red. But he gulped and said, I know that me getting elected and everything, I know it was sort of a joke, and it's pretty funny." Tim Miller wagged his head and went, "Ha, ha, 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 ha," exaggerating a big laugh. The rest of the kids laughed too, but when Hart raised his hand, everyone got quiet. Again, Hart was amazed by how quickly the kids quieted down for him. And again, so was Mr. Minert. Hart said, "It's funny and all, but the concert's really got to happen. Like, we've really got to stand up in the auditorium in front of everybody for a long time and do something." "Hey," said Tim, "I can dance. Look!" And he jumped out of his chair and started swinging his hips and waving his arms around. Hart grinned and nodded, and then he said, "Yeah, but can you do that all by yourself, up on the stage, for half an hour, and with your grandma watching?" That got a big laugh, and Tim took a bow and sat down. Hart said, "So I started thinking last night, and I don't think we'd better have any free periods, because making a concert happen, it won't be easy." Tim and a few of his pals said, "Hey, no fair. Yeah, no fair." But most of the kids were listening to Hart and nodding right there with him. Mr. Minert was listening too. This was the part he'd been waiting for. Hart said, "So I've got a question for Mr. Minert, a very important question." Mr. Minert stood up and faced Hart. The music teacher was careful to keep his face under control, to keep his expression neutral. He didn't want to appear too happy about being asked to be the director again, and he wanted to be able to look surprised when Hart asked him. Hart cleared his throat. The room went still as a comic strip. Hart said, "I want to know, Mr. Minert, because you know how you said we could do anything for our part of the big concert?" Mr. Minert nodded, and Hart went on. "So what I want to know is, if the chorus part of the concert went on for more than 30 minutes, will we get in trouble? Because I've got tons of great ideas about cool stuff we could do, but I don't know how it can all fit into just half an hour." Before Mr. Minert could open his mouth, Ed Kenner called out, "What kind of stuff, Hart?" "Yeah," said Colleen. "Do you mean like costumes and decorations like snowflakes or stars? Because I've been thinking about the concert too." Hart nodded, grabbing a clipboard from his backpack. "Yeah, lots of costumes and stuff like drum solos and maybe karaoke with the audience. And maybe somebody could dress up like Elvis in a Santa suit." "Me!" yelled Tim. "Me! I can be a perfect Elvis!" And he got up and started dancing again. Jenna waved both hands. "Hart! Hart! At home, we've got these 2 dreidel costumes my aunt made. Like, you spin around in them and you get all dizzy and fall down. But it's okay because they're made of this soft rubber stuff. They're really funny. Could we use them, do you think?" "Sure, sounds great," said Hart. "There's a ton of stuff we could do." The room began buzzing, and 6 or 7 other kids were trying to get Hart's attention, but he held up his hand and turned back to Mr. Minert. Again, it got quiet, and Hart said, "So what do you think, Mr. Minert? Can our part of the concert go a little longer?" Mr. Minert was having trouble with his face. It would not behave. His mouth was smiling, almost smiling, but not his eyes. No smile there at all. His voice wasn't much better. He growled, "Well, it's not good to go on too long." "But everybody's coming to see us, right?" asked Hart. "Like you said?" Mr. Minert nodded slightly. "So," said Hart, "it ought to be okay as long as we don't go way too long, right?" Mr. Minert's face was in big trouble now. No smile at all. "Yes, I guess so." "Great," said Hart. He turned back to the class. "Now, we've really got to get serious, okay? So, Colleen, could you be sort of like the stage director? I know you could do a really great job." Colleen smiled and nodded, and Hart said, "And could you maybe get some kids together and come up with ideas about decorations and costumes too? Because we can do whatever we want. It doesn't have to look like a regular old concert. And then we can all talk about the ideas on Monday. And does anybody have one of those karaoke computer programs?" Anne and Lee raised their hands. Hart nodded and said, "Great. Over the weekend, you should both look at them and see if there are any Christmas-type songs, because that'd be really fun. And listen, everybody, listen. We should probably sing some regular concert songs too, because, like, we're the chorus. So Everybody should make a list of some songs that might be good, and then we can write them all on the board on Monday and decide which ones to sing. And if anyone wants to sing a solo, that'd be great, but no one has to. Now, how many kids here know how to play an instrument? Completely ignored, Mr. Minor walked over and sat down at his desk. He tried to act like he wasn't interested, but he was. He also tried to act like his feelings weren't hurt, but they were. And he was still having plenty of trouble with his face. But more than that, his mind was spinning. He could not believe what he'd just seen. 4 minutes. It had taken Hart Evans only 4 minutes to get the whole group excited about working together. And not only that, everyone had practically cheered about doing more than they had to. Watching out of the corner of his eye, Mr. Minor saw Hart hurry over to Ross, heard Hart use a good loud voice as he said, "Hey, do you think you could be in charge of organizing all the music on Monday? Can I count on you?" Ross smiled and nodded, excited, honored that Hart would give him such an important job. Brilliant! The word jumped into Mr. Minor's mind. The kid's already got Colleen and Ross working for him. Oh, brilliant, and he's even got Tim Miller focused. Still wacky, but focused. Amazing. As if to prove the point, Tim ran over to Mr. Minor's desk, panting and bobbing from side to side. Mr. Minor, you know that thing Elvis does when he sings, like with his upper lip? Is it sort of like this? And Tim pushed his face into a sneer. Mr. Minor smiled and nodded. Almost. Rent an Elvis movie this weekend, maybe Blue Hawaii. You'll get it. Cool, said Tim, and he spun off into orbit again, playing an air guitar. Over the next 35 minutes, the music room did not plunge into chaos. Instead, small groups formed up, some sitting on the floor, some around the tables down front, and some at desks pulled into the corners. There was a lot of loud talking, a lot of moving around, and some arguing and shouting, laughing too. There was plenty of noise, but most of it had a purpose. And whenever Mr. Minor glanced up, there was Hart in the thick of it all, walking from cluster to cluster with his clipboard, making notes, making jokes, making friends, pulling the whole chorus together, and smiling. Because Hart Evans was not having any trouble with his face. No trouble at all.